My name is Meher Ali. For 30 years, I wore the khaki uniform, saluted superiors, chased criminals, and comforted victims. The city taught me discipline, justice, and sometimes heartbreak. I spent most of my life commanding order in chaos. But after my retirement, silence became deafening, and the streets I once patrolled now felt like strangers. I didn't want to grow old beneath ceiling fans and television static. I longed for air not choked by smoke and sirens. That's why I moved to a small village in southern Punjab, green fields, narrow paths, and the distant hum of tractor engines. A place where days weren't measured by crime reports, but by the ripening of wheat and the rhythm of prayer calls. I rented a small brick house at the village's edge. Every morning, I'd take walks through the fields, nodding at passers-by, many of whom still looked at me with respectful curiosity. I was the outsider with city shoes and a stiff back and used to bending. That's when I noticed her. Zareena. She worked the land alone, strong arms, sun-kissed skin, a faded dupatta draped across her shoulders as she guided cattle or watered rows of vegetables. She moved with purpose, her presence grounded like the very soil she tilled. We spoke first over a broken water pump. I offered to help, and she, reluctantly, accepted. Over the weeks, our interactions became more frequent. We shared cups of chai by her porch, talked about rainfall, grain prices, and books I thought no one else in the village read. I discovered she'd never married, not because she lacked proposals, but because she never found someone who saw her as an equal. We were different in many ways: age, background, experience. But there was an ease between us, a mutual respect born not from attraction, but from understanding. I found myself smiling again, not out of politeness, but out of something I hadn't felt in years: peace. When I asked her, one crisp winter morning, if she'd consider marrying me, she laughed first. A short, surprised laugh that faded into silence. Then she said, "You've faced bullets. But have you ever faced a village's gossip?" I told her I didn't care. That at 60, I had nothing left to prove to anyone but myself. She didn't answer that day. But 2 weeks later, she came to my door with a small cloth bag and a quiet yes. We married simply, under a neem tree, with a few neighbors as witnesses. It felt like starting over, not just with her, but with myself. But peace, like seasons, never lasts forever. Something I would learn soon enough. Married life with Zareena was unlike anything I'd imagined. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic embraces. Instead, love grew in quiet routines. The way she handed me a towel before I asked, the way I waited up for her when she stayed in the fields late. It was a partnership built not on passion but on rhythm. I took to farm life slowly. My hands, once used to paperwork and pistols, now learned to prune, sow, and carry. Zareena never mocked my clumsiness. She watched with amused patience as I stumbled through mud or fed chickens like a nervous guest at a banquet. With time, I adjusted. The land demanded respect, not force. And that humility changed me. 2 years passed before our first child arrived, a daughter, Halima. She had Zareena's almond eyes and my quiet temperament. When she clutched my finger for the first time, something in me softened irreversibly. A year and a half later, our son came, Ralph. Loud, curious, always running toward trouble like his father once did. Our home, though modest, was filled with life. Zareena taught the children to plant coriander and braid garlic. I taught them to read maps and play chess. Each evening, we sat on the floor with lentils, rice, and the stories of our day. Villagers grew fond of us. Some gossiped, of course. A retired officer marrying a younger farmer was not an everyday tale. But time, I'd learned, has a way of silencing idle tongues. We were too focused on our lives to worry about theirs. Yet even in this peace, I noticed something I chose to ignore. Zareena had become quieter. She no longer hummed while cooking or lingered in conversations. At first, I blamed exhaustion. 2 young children, long days in the sun, and the weight of running a home. It all added up. But then she started disappearing for hours under vague errands. She would mention going to the nearby market, yet return with only a packet of salt. Her phone, once forgotten on tables, was now guarded, always face down, always silenced. One evening, after the children had gone to bed, I asked gently, "Is everything all right?" She looked at me, startled, as if caught sleepwalking, and said, "Of course, just tired." I nodded, not pressing further. But I didn't sleep well that night. Not because I didn't believe her, but because I feared I did. And deep down, I wondered, had I found love too late? Or had I simply wandered into a story I wasn't meant to stay in? Something was changing, and though I couldn't yet name it, I knew the calm we had built was beginning to shift. The wind had shifted, not in the skies, but within our home. Zareena moved like a shadow, present but distant, her laughter now rare and her gaze often averted. She smiled when the children tugged at her, but her eyes held a faraway ache, like she was listening to something no one else could hear. I tried to stay busy, tending to the crops, helping with homework, even painting the old storage shed. But when your world becomes quiet, even whispers sound like thunder. I noticed the small things. Her increasing time away from the house, her sudden urge to dress better on certain days, the hurried way she ended phone calls when I walked in. At first, I convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe motherhood had worn her down. Maybe village life was stifling her spirit. But doubts, once planted, don't stay seeds. They grow, twisting around everything they touch. One afternoon, I followed her. She said she was going to the mill for wheat. Instead, I watched from a distance as she stopped near the edge of the canal, where a motorbike had already been parked. A young man waited, tall, clean-shaven, city shoes on rural dust. They didn't touch, but they stood too close. She laughed in a way I hadn't heard in months. His name was Faiq, a relative from another village, she later claimed. "We grew up together," she said, when I finally confronted her. Her tone was flat, her arms crossed. "He helped my family once when we were struggling." I asked, "And now?" She looked away. I didn't plan for him to come back, but I needed to see what was still there. Her words hit harder than any blow I'd ever taken in uniform. I'd faced criminals, riots, and courtroom trials, but nothing prepared me for the quiet collapse of trust between husband and wife. "I never crossed a line," she whispered, "not in action, but in heart." I asked. She said nothing. That night I sat outside under the neem tree where we were married. The air was still, but my thoughts stormed. Was I just a phase in her life? A pause between the past and what she really wanted? The children sensed something was wrong. Halima became quieter, drawing pictures of broken houses. Ralph asked if I was angry at Alma. I didn't answer him. What could I say? Our home had become a museum. Everything in place, but hollow inside. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was wounded, yes. Confused, deeply. But mostly I was afraid. Afraid that the love I had built with aged hands was now slipping through fingers younger than mine. And I knew something had to change. The days that followed moved slowly, like plows dragging through dry soil. I stopped asking where Zareena was going. She stopped offering answers. We shared the same space but lived in different time zones, eating meals in silence, sleeping back to back, parenting through mechanical motions. Then one afternoon, I came home to find her phone on the table, unlocked, buzzing. A message from Faiq lit the screen. "I miss the way you used to look at me." I didn't read further. I didn't need to. That evening, after the children were asleep, I stood in the doorway as Zareena folded laundry. "I saw the message," I said simply. She paused, held a shirt too long in her hands, then slowly set it down. "I know. No excuses. No anger. Just resignation." I sat across from her. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then, almost in a whisper, she said, "I never meant to hurt you. I thought I had let go of that part of my life, but he reminded me of who I was before everything." I nodded. "And what about now? Who are you with me?" She blinked, and tears welled in her eyes. "I don't know anymore." That truth hurt more than any lie could have. But I had a choice to make, not just for myself, but for the two young hearts who called me Baba. I told her I needed time. I would sleep in the guest shed for now. She agreed, though her eyes pleaded for something she couldn't name. In the days that followed, we functioned, barely. Halima clung to her mother. Ralph followed me like a shadow. The house was colder despite the warm season. But then came a shift. Zareena began to change, not with words, but with effort. She deleted Faiq's number. She left her phone openly on tables. She invited me to join her and the children for walks again, and even though I declined at first, I noticed. One evening, she stood beside me in the field and said, "If you decide to leave, I won't stop you. But if you choose to stay, I'll spend every day earning that choice." Her voice didn't tremble. It carried no drama, just honesty. I didn't answer then. But the next morning, I made tea for two instead of one. We sat together, not as healed lovers, but as people willing to try. The betrayal hadn't vanished. The pain hadn't dissolved. But the roots of something new, raw, cautious, but real, were beginning to push through the soil. And maybe, just maybe, love wasn't about never breaking. Maybe it was about who stays to rebuild after the cracks appear.